Okay, after that slightly awful start. Right, I'm Liz Goodyear. For those who haven't ever encountered me before, I'm going to tell you my moth journey. Except that as I prepared it, I decided it really wasn't my moth journey. It's actually more my moth adventure. So bear with me. If you were hoping to hear my journey, you're now going to hear my adventure. Okay, first of all, I have to go back a little while. And I'm afraid for those who are really only wanting to hear about moths, you're going to hear about butterflies for a few moments because I need to take you back to the 1960s and explain how I really started to become interested in butterflies. And I think many of you will remember the Brook Bond, well, some of you will remember the Brook Bond picture cards. And this was the British butterflies, which came out in 1963. And although I was still quite young then, it really got my interest into butterflies going. I mean, there were lots of different cards, trees, flowers, foreign butterflies, fish, all sorts of things. But the butterflies were the ones that really stuck with me. And when I was little, I probably never read this, but I'm just going to read it very quickly. This is the introduction in 1963, and it said the butterflies of the British Isles are slowly decreasing in numbers and variety, mainly owing to the widespread and often pointless use of chemical sprays which throw ridding crops of harmful pests, destroy caterpillars and butterflies, natural food plants. Similarly, the ever-expanding growth of towns and factories eats into the large tracts of rough and tilled land where many butterflies breed. And I hate to say it, nothing has changed. But this is my original book, even with the old glue. I even noticed the other day when looking at the pictures that for some of the pictures, they actually show their food plants. And I had never noticed that before. And it also states under brown Argus that it feeds on storksbill. Now, a lot of books now say that that's only recent, but it would appear that in 1963, the brown Argus was also eating storksbill. And perhaps it hadn't been reading the books. But we're jumping to the 1970s. We'd moved from Surrey to Norfolk. And this was my main pastime. I was sailing. I was sailing every weekend in the summer. And there's me, Alton Week Regatta, the bloodbath. And I might say that about 10 seconds after that photo was taken by the local paper, we capsized and I went swimming. And I think we gave up that race because it was really, really windy. Then a few days later, you're going to be saying, why on earth am I showing you some pictures of Year 1 designs, which are locally known as white boats? Well, apart from the fact that they're really beautiful, in my mind, almost all the butterflies are named after butterflies or moths. And we have 92 is marbled white, speckled wood, brimstone, and silver skipper. Now, some of the names were a bit well, not quite butterflies, but I suspect silver skipper, if it had been silver spotted skipper, it wouldn't have fitted over the back of the boat because there's only so much room that they can curve it into. And then this just to slightly change the subject. In around about 1979, my brother had commissioned his own Year 1 design. It was one of the first glass fibre or known locally as plastic boats, and he named it Chalk Hill Blue. And there you will see at the very bottom, this is actually my boat. Yep, I own a boat as well as I record butterflies and moths. And fast forward to 2023, and this is me helming on quite a breezy day in the top two pictures with my daughter and my best pal Lorraine. And then later on during Horning Regatta Week, where for strangely I wasn't last. In fact, I'm not always last. I can win. But anyway, let's go back. Let's go back now to the 80s. I just want to try and move something out of my screen. No, that didn't work. Let's go back again. Right, Field Guide to the Butterflies of Other Insects of Britain. I don't know if anyone remembers this series of books. It was produced by the Reader's Digest, and there was trees and flowers and birds and the butterflies and other insects. And again, fascinating book, beautiful illustrations, and some of the first Richard Lewington illustrations. Here we are, a page of Brown's, all with Richard Lewington drawings. And again, here he's got the moths, the swallow prominence and lesser swallows, again, his drawings. But then it also featured day-flying moths. And as you can see, these weren't by Richard Lewington, but were still really good. And I expect most of you will always remember the cinnabar caterpillar from your youth. And then we'll fast forward again to the 1990s. By the 1990s, by now I'd got 3 children, and we'd moved from Poole to Tunbridge and then in Ware. And I had a little bit more time. And in 1996, we had gone on holiday to Florida in April. So for a change, we were around in August. And I remember looking at my buddleia bush, which was in the front garden, and seeing so many peacocks. Now, okay, I know this is not a buddleia bush, and I don't have any photos of peacocks on a buddleia bush, so you're going to have to do with hemp agrimony and red admirals. But this was, get the idea. This is getting the idea. And I just thought, well, who do I tell? Someone needs to know this information, but who? This was still, the internet was only just still round the corner, really. Emails had not started. There was no information out there. So I just remembered these peacocks on the buddleia. And then my husband also saw in the paper, there was a garden butterfly survey being organised by Dr. Margaret Vickery, where she simply wanted to know what butterflies came into your garden and what they were nectaring on. And that list is still on our website, and it really helps gardeners know what to plant in their garden to encourage butterflies. And again, I'm not sure of the timeline, but I was getting more and more interested in the butterflies, and especially when we went on holiday, and I would buy books, which I hoped would help identify the butterfly, but they never did, because when you go abroad, there's rather far too many blues to remember. But I saw this book by the butterflies by Brian Sawford, and I would sit there looking at the species. I would look at the distribution maps. I would look to see where some of the rare species used to be found. I'd look to see where the best sites were, and I was just getting slowly more and more interested. And then one day, this man came round to the door, knocking on the door, saying, would I be interested in joining the Herts Middx Wildlife Trust? And I thought, yeah, I would. So he came in, signed me up, and in the literature was a talk by Gavin Vickery, who was then on the committee in our local arts centre. I say the Herts Middx branch of Butterfly Conservation Committee. And I went along, and needless to say, I was totally fascinated by what he was telling me. And he was selling the very first recorder's report by John Murray. This was for 1995, the first year of the Butterflies for the New Millennium project, which had just been launched by Butterfly Conservation. And basically, he wanted people going out recording in all the blank squares, because you can see with Holly Blue, there's all this area here with no records. And I lived there, and you can guess I was sent out quite regularly to TL41, which was basically a butterfly desert. There were no butterflies, but I would endeavour to find them. So the 1997 to 2000, I spent an awful lot of time trying to survey in blank squares. And then in the year 2000, I joined the branch committee. And at the very first committee meeting, we discussed the formation of a new group, the Herts Moth Group, under, I quote, the leadership of Colin Plant. Now, the Herts Moth Group was basically part of the Herts Natural History Society. You pay to be a member of the Herts Natural History Society. You do not have to be a member or a paid member of the Herts Moth Group. Colin is basically the Herts Moth Group as it was then. And in 1993, Colin had produced this book on the larger moths of the London area, because Colin, not only was he the county recorder for Hertfordshire, he was the county recorder for London, and he had produced this book. And obviously you can see it's got all the distribution maps, and he wanted to write a new book on the distribution of moths in Hertfordshire. And this meant he was trying to encourage more people to record moths and get more, basically more dots on the map. And one way to achieve this was to get people going out to record leaf mines in under-recorded areas. Now, I expect a lot of you listening do know about leaf mines, but for those who don't, basically, in most cases, it's a small moth that lays its egg on a leaf. And it's a very, very small moth. It might lay its egg on the top of the leaf, the underside of the leaf, the stem. It might leave, it isn't necessarily tree leaves, it might be flower leaves, it can be stems of things, all sorts of things. There are other things that lay eggs on leaves, but you can see here we've got what I call a wiggly worm, a stigmella on hazel, a fold, a blotch. I love this. This looks like a snail trail, but this is actually a mine on white poplar. There we've got a bit of hawthorn, two very easy moth mines to find on field maple. They even lay eggs in the keys of sycamore or field maple. And this here, I don't know if you can see it, is an actual moth that would have come out of a similar species to what would have laid on the field maple. And I don't know whether you can see it here. This is, where's the camera? That's the pot. And it is 42 millimeters across, or 1.5/8 of an inch. And you can see it is incredibly tiny. So the easiest way to find these moths is to find the leaf mine. And most of these moths will lay them on individual trees, only one species. There are some that will lay on more than one. And by identifying the type of mine, you will then therefore identify the moth. And I would go out to lots and lots of squares, just like I've been doing with the butterflies, and bag them all up. I thought at first I'd try and identify them, but I soon realized this was a complete waste of time. So I'd bag them up or take them round to Colin, and he would spend his evening identifying them. And by doing so, he then got lots of dots on the map. And as you can see, in 2008, he published, well, the Herts Natural History Society published The Moths of Hertfordshire. And he quote at the bottom, "To Liz, without whose records there would be many gaps." But now we start. Now, having introduced myself to leaf mining, my next phase was to get to grips with day flying moths, because I was quite interested in both the dingy and grizzle skipper, of which there are some very similar day flying moths that pretend to be the other two species. Now, once you get to know them, you know full well what's what. But when you're new to it, you quickly had to realize that if the moth dived into the grass, it was not going to be a grizzle skipper or a dingy skipper. But that was where I was beginning to start to understand moths a bit better. And then 2002, I was given a Skinner moth trap. Now, the principle of this is that this light comes on, the moths see this light, and then they think, oh, let's go in and have a look around the trap, or something similar to that. And you can see there's several egg boxes in there. And I should say that the only photo I have of this first trap was 2013, when it was about to be replaced. As you can see, it really had seen better days. Now, set up here is 230-watt actinic. And this, as I say, this is called a Skinner trap. And there's somewhere, not in the picture, is a control box. But originally, I started off with this really bright mercury vapor light. Now, my neighbours were really understanding and very good about this, and they were quite happy to let me carry on using this very, very bright light, which illuminated the entire garden, the entire neighbourhood. Unfortunately, my daughters weren't so sympathetic. The amount of flack that I got from them, because their bedrooms were in the back of the house, and of course the light was shining into the windows, was so great that eventually it sort of made it not that pleasant. And I played around with buying actinic tubes that you might find in a fish tank and various things. And eventually I purchased the twin 30-watt actinic tubes. Now, if there's anyone wanting to know more about what bulbs to use, and ultraviolet, which is what is basically attracting the moth to the trap, and wavelengths. I'm not a scientist. Put your question in the comments, and someone that's watching who does understand this will probably answer it for you, because I can't. But anyway, here's my first 3 moth species. Literally, these are the first 3 moths that I recorded. Now, you might think the pictures are pretty ropey, but I've got to take you back to the year 2000 to 2002. Now, just think about it. Those who've started recording recently have no problem accessing the internet or sending emails to people. The year 2000, the internet was really only just getting going. It was going, but not in the sense that moth recorders were practically totally engaged with it. Emails were only just starting. The first of the Yahoo groups were starting, and digital cameras were still very much in their infancy. Now, what I was using here was, we had a movie camera, a video camera with a cassette, but it also had the facility to take still photos. So what I would do, I'd get up in the morning, go and check my moths, get my kids to school. Then I was looking after the branch website, so I had web space available. Upload the picture, give a link, and then send it out to the Herts Moth Group, Yahoo group. And then by lunchtime, someone had very kindly identified the moth. That was great, but I really had to start thinking for myself here. I couldn't rely on everyone else identifying my moths. So I invested in Skinner. This is the moths of the British Isles, which Bernard Skinner, who had devised the Skinner trap, brought out some years before. Now here we have, I even found, sitting in the book was still the Amazon invoice. It was £38 in 2002. And I hadn't even realised Amazon was going that long, but apparently it was going from the mid-90s. But you can see from here, they're all pin specimens. So here we go. An emperor moth looks like the picture, but you tell me that a Chinese character here looks anything like that little image down there, or a scalloped hook tip looks like that. It was pretty hopeless. You could spend hours going through the book and never get near the moth that you were trying to find. But UK Moths had started. This is still run today by Ian Kimber. I mean, that was a wonderful resource in the early days. And then Richard Lowington brought out this book. Well, his drawings were in it. It was Paul Waring, Martin Townsend. And you can see this is my third edition, and it's worn. It goes up to the mouth trap every morning. And here we are, scalloped hook tip. That looks like, they look the same, don't they? Same here, Chinese character looks the same. It started to make my life easier. And then a little while later, the micro moths came out. Now, micro moths are hard, they're small. Now, the pyralids, which is on this page, aren't so bad. They're a little bit easier to identify. They're a bit bigger, and some of them have English names. But it really wasn't until lockdown or when I retired that I started to take the micro moths more seriously. And you can see the ones on the right are fairly distinct. But then you've got, for instance, these two, almost identical, and they're small. Look at these. These are small moths. They're 2.5 times the original image. It really is hard work with your micros. But then my daughter, who actually works for an optician and is a specialist in low vision, said to me, would Dad like one of these for his birthday presents? Because Dad likes rocks. I said, no, I would like one of these for my birthday present. So I got this, and it's really helped. And then also, just to add, we've got the addition of the identification apps, such as Obsidentify, or however you pronounce it. Now, just a word of warning of those. If you use them, don't take the identification as gospel, because there are occasions where it tells me, for instance, I've got a slug or a snail. I've even had a beaver, I think. I don't know how it decided one of my moths was a beaver, but it did. So what you do is you get to near enough 100% accuracy, then you look it up in the book or on the internet and decide for yourself whether it is the moth they're saying. If it's something that's rare, you then get a photograph, and then you get someone else to confirm it. So when you send it off to the county recorder, he will know it's been identified by more than one person. But here we go, just a sample of the few small moths that I've photoed over the years. These are probably the best five photos I could find. You will see that I'm using the scientific names, which a lot of people do still use. I say scientific because although some people refer to them as Latin, they're mostly made up names and don't have any great bearing on the Latin language. So I prefer to refer to them as scientific. And you'll also note that some of them have got English names. This is sort of been occurring in more recent years where people have been trying to give them English names. There was a list created about 10 years ago, which I was to some extent using, but then when the latest book of the micro moths came out, they produced a different list, which just confuses a lot of people. So I tend to stick to the scientific name. But anyway, going back to my traps, here we go. As you saw in 2013, my dear trusty Skinner was meeting the end of its life. And we were going through a period of pretty frosty weather. So I decided to make a new one. So I bought some plywood. I measured it out on the lounge floor, as you do. I then took it up to my daughter's bedroom, who was at college, and made it in her room. Now, there used to be a really good design on the Anglian Lepidopterist Supply website of how to make your own Skinner. And for some stupid reason, I never took a copy, and it's not there now, or not to my knowledge. And another stupid thing I did was I painted it dark brown with preservative paint, and it meant that I couldn't see the moths because most of them are brown. So 2020, it was beginning to fall apart, but I decided to renovate it. So I painted it white. This is the control box, by the way, that I mentioned in the earlier images, so that helps power it all. I have a timer. I do not sit and watch the trap all night long. I do not stay up all night to watch moths. I put it on a timer. I might go up on a really hot summer's night if it looks a good night for moths and have a check. And then I wait till the morning, I get up and I go and check the moths. If some fly away before then, that's so be it. And anyway, so that's how I go. So 2022, I then decided I needed a new trap because this didn't last very long, the renovation. So I went out and bought the same ingredients and made it. And to my utter horror, it only lasted 2 years. It was a disaster. And here you are, you see me in the morning, cup of coffee, books, helper or not, and the trap. There was a report the other day on the moth recorders meeting saying that moth traps should really be on the ground. I have it raised because it's actually easier for me to bend over and look in the morning. Otherwise, my back will start to suffer. And here you see, just to the left was what happened to it totally rotted. It was so disappointing. And if you look here, you've got some plastic cladding, which my brother had. And I thought to myself, I'd love to make a trap out of that. So I went back to the company where he got his stuff, which was a largish piece, and they couldn't sell me anything for less than £100. So I thought, well, no, I'm not going to put up with that. And I looked around their display and I found they had these 5mm Perspex sheets, legacy from lockdown. I looked at it and thought, perhaps I could make something. So I bought them, went home and thought about it for about 18 months. And then I sort of decided I could no longer have a trap that collapsed down like the other ones had. So I'd make it out of Perspex. You will note that these sheets here, which are the lids, are still the original Perspex from the original trap. Now, the jury is out as to whether it will work. I do tend to put more egg boxes in because I think the moths might be detrimental to the moths otherwise, so they can hide up. But then a lot of people are making traps out of buckets and plastic containers of all sorts, with all sorts of different light bulbs and different combinations. But the one thing I did have commented was that the sunlight might crack the Perspex. So I made a cover, and needless to say, I made it out of sail boat cover material, which I just happened to have lying around, as you do. So we will see what happens this summer, because I only made it in the autumn last year. And just for info, We have other types of trap. We have the heath trap on the left, which is my other trap. That's quite portable, very lightweight, and just a 15-watt tinnic. And here is a Robinson style trap. It's supplied by ALS, and I found the picture on Wikipedia. I am not saying that Anglian Lepidopterus is the only place you can go, obviously, but I always find them very helpful. And then the other type of recording that I do is the use of pheromone lures. Now this, I had bought some lures some time ago, but I just never got the hang of it. But 2020, just before lockdown, I thought I'm going to have to do something during lockdown because I'm going to have plenty of time free, I think. And again, I saw that they were also supplying the lures with traps and little baskets here. So you put the lure in the trap and then you leave it in the garden or wherever you are and just wait. And as you can see here, a few years later, they also brought out a smaller trap and you can buy sets of the baskets. So what I basically do, because you have to be really careful with cross-contamination with these lures, you mustn't mishandle them. You have to keep them very, very separate. And I put them in sealed freezer bags with zips and put them in the freezer, and you keep them in the freezer all year round until you need them. Just to make a point, only males are attracted to pheromone lures. And here you'll see I've got a lure and a bit of netting. I've got another lure in the basket, and I've got a hornet moth coming to the lure. Now, the hornet moth is one that burrows, the caterpillar burrows it holes into the base of poplar trees. Poplar trees are in sight of my garden, but I have to go to the poplar trees. Whereas with the lunar hornet moth, the big sallow is only just beneath the poplars. This one will come in my garden. You can see it is quite a big moth. Whoops, I've gone back again. Raspberry clearwing is another one. Feeds on raspberry canes. Red-tipped clearwing I've had come into my garden. Red-belted clearwing, there is a large red-belted clearwing, and the way to tell the difference is what these are called white palps. These are on the red-belted clearwing. Red-belted comes to the same lure as the large red. So because I've got a very large ancient apple tree, which is one of its food plants in my garden, I do get quite a few of these. So I have to sort of capture them, put them in the fridge to keep them cool, and then identify them all before I release them, just in case I get a large red-belted, which of course is unlikely because they are very rare. Sallow clearwing was a bit of a joke. In 2020, having had some success with my original set of clearwing lures, I looked down the list that could be bought and I saw sallow clearwing lure. Well, I've got sallows nearby, I'll buy that. Only to read the documentation or the literature to say that it's a very rare moth, only found in a few areas of England, and only flies every other year. Oh, I thought, oh well, put it back in the freezer. And no, well, let's try it. There's no harm in trying. So I put the lure out, went out, and to my almost horror, I got back and there was a clearwing in it. And the more I looked at it, the more I looked at the books, and more I asked people to give me their opinions, it became quite obvious this was a sallow clearwing. So I drove over to see Colin Plant with the moth, and then a couple of days later he could confirm that it was definitely a sallow clearwing. Not only had I had the first record for Hertfordshire, I had actually had the first record for the east of England. Now, since then, several other people did buy the lure that year and they did record it, but it was basically a lesson. There's no harm in trying. Current clearwing, this one was actually it's the only one I've ever seen without a lure. It was in my greenhouse. Yellow-legged is one of the hardest ones I find to trap, and it is quite often quite late in the season when all the other ones have stopped. Orange-tailed clearwing, that's just rather smart. And then the six-belted is one that's more of a brownfield birdsfoot trefoil feeder, and I tend to have to go to find that one, whereas all the others shown here, apart from the hornet and the six-belted, have come to lures in my garden. I haven't had to go and find them. And another one that comes to the lure is the emperor moth. As you can see, the male here on the left with the feathered antennae, and the female will occasionally come to light, which she has done a few times. So that's my home adventures. Now, I'm not going to show you lots and lots of my garden moths because they are fairly mundane, but I will show you some from other locations. And this is where I go to stay when I'm in Horning. It's my brother's house. This is where I take the trap on holiday, or I use the heath trap that you saw earlier in that picture. I used it for the very first time in 2003. One of the first moths I caught was an old kitten, and I can assure you I have tried every time at that same time of year, end of May, June, to capture another one, and I have yet to do it. And that means doing it almost every year since then. It is, well, frustrating to put it mildly. But anyway, here we go. Some of these moths I do see very, very occasionally in my garden, but these are quite regulars at Horning. And you can see at the bottom, it has a good supply of garden tigers. It's right by the river, so there are nights when conditions are really unfavourable, clear sky, breezy. Moths don't like crossing that river, and I can often not have a single moth. But when it's good, it is good. And these may look the most boring moths on the planet, but they are rare. We've got the dotted footman and the small dotted footman, both nationally rare, which I do record at Horning, and a reed dagger, which I've only recorded once, which is nationally scarce. V moth is now a mega, and I put it in a pot, and I was so terrified I'd lose it before I got a photo of it. I just had to take a photo into the pot. Cream bordered green pea is a Hertfordshire species, but I've yet to record it. And the chevron, well, this was last summer. For various reasons, I just did not run the trap every night during the regatta week in August. But Horning doesn't have any street lights, so it's ever so dark at night in the house. So we were leaving the bathroom light on, and the windows were open. And I saw this moth on the curtain in the morning. Oh, I thought, oh, there's a moth there. Went down to the sailing club to get my bacon roll, came back. Oh, I suppose I better pot that moth, just in case it's not what I think it is, which I thought was a pine carpet or something. And then I looked at it and thought, this is a chevron. This is this is a lifer. And it's a rare moth. And I thought, I didn't even try. And I caught a chevron. So that's the photo I got from on the dining room table at my brother's, and my grandson then went and released it for me. And then taking to the river, and this is my old boat. I used to own this boat until 2019. It was my father's, and it was very old fashioned. It's nearly 100 years old now. But I got it converted so that it had plug, and I could plug my electrics, my moth trap in with an inverter. And I would occasionally go off up the river or with friends, and I'd run the moth trap. I never recorded anything that special, but I did try, and it was jolly good fun. But you have to realize that you've got to be careful of your leads trailing on the grass, because people might be walking past and various things. But this was just a beautiful location. One mention of butterflies again. It's a really brilliant place to see swallowtails, and you can't miss the sunrise in the morning. This is above Potterham Bridge, which a lot of boats can't get through now, but at the time we could still get that boat through. And then another year, I went trapping just one night at some friends, which weren't far from Horning. It was a square with no moth records, and I just happened to record a great pom and an early two-stripe that night, plus a few others. It was quite a good night, even though it was raining. And then we've got friends who live in deepest, darkest Wales, literally. It's near Llandovery, Llandilo, and Lampeter. And just to make life even more interesting, the farmyard covers 10 kilometre squares. So if I trap on the right-hand side, I'm in one square, and if I trap here, I'm in another. Unfortunately, the local farmer still uses this barn, and therefore I'm rather reluctant to leave the moth trap in the entrance because I don't want him running it over. So I do tend to do the left-hand side. And once again, we do get some rather different moths. Devon carpet, red sawgrass, mapwing swift, grey arches, double line, white marked, green arches, recorded once in Ware, never to be recorded again since 2002. And I think that is one of the most superb moths in existence. Look at his proboscis there. They must have found something tasty there. And then we also went on the canal. I took my heath trap, another empty square, literally in the middle of nowhere. We were on the canal for a week, but you can see there's a towpath, and you could never be sure somebody might be walking along there, or if you were moored too close to boats, it just wasn't fair on the other people. But this one night we were in the middle of nowhere. There was no one on that other boat. And although I didn't actually record anything specifically rare or new, I had 23 species and 86 moths in an unrecorded square, which I thought was pretty good going. And then I've even taken the trap abroad. This was the very first holiday in 2004 where I took a couple of the actinic tubes, packed up, we went by car, so there was space. And although the pictures aren't that great, it was a fun experience. Trying to identify them was even more fun because I hadn't a clue and I didn't have any of the European books that some people buy. Eventually, I got a few of them identified. I still have a few that aren't, even going back to 2004. Gozo, I took the heath trap out, took it via Ryanair. They didn't seem to complain. It got there in one piece and it got back in one piece. And there were some nice moths that time. And then more recently, this other year, we went to Rhodes. Before I forget, I must explain that if you go to some countries and want to record moths, you do need a license. Do not assume that you can just set up anywhere. I've just been taking this simple, very simple black light, just plugs into the first plug available. I can wrap it up in the hand luggage, make sure it's secure, find a white wall that these houses often have, and I can record the moths not that seriously. Problem with Rhodes was, one, it was very close to the Valley of the Butterflies, which some of you will know is not, they're not butterflies, they're Jersey tigers, which you will know I do have a bit of a problem with. They found the light very quickly, and then soon after, the next night, the wasps found the light as well, which made it a bit of a race in the morning to identify and put the moths, take the moths somewhere safe before the wasps had their breakfast. And then this year, we were in Rhodes, this is still Rhodes again. These are some of the moths that I recorded that holiday. Just some which are some that you might record here, some which are unique to Europe. And then Sicily, we did the same again, took a black light. Four spotted on the left is one of the most common species in Europe that you will record. I've turned it up every single time I've ever trapped. It is one of our rarest species, but these were four of the species that I recorded this year. And then before I finish, I would just like to tell you about some of my favourite sites. Hertfordshire, one of my favourite sites. I say favourite sites, these are for day flying moths. This is Hexton Chalk Pit, right in the top of the county. And if you are very lucky, you will possibly find a small purple bar, this tiny moth on the left-hand side, which is a heavily cropped image, and they're very difficult to get close to. So I was quite pleased to get even that image. And this little Pyrosta, the Negrata, which is like the mint moth that you might see in your garden, but much darker and much rarer. And we mentioned just now the four spotted. This is four spotted habitat. This is in the northeast of the county, in the Barley area. This moth seems to be only found on the Herts, Essex, Cambridge border, or in that vicinity, or there's a hot spot there. And we have a very cooperative farmer who lets us survey on his land. And these are a couple of the individuals that I've recorded. You'll see it's nectaring on field bindweed, which is a very, very common weed plant, but it's also its food plant. But considering how often you find field bindweed, why the moth is purely restricted to this area. I think we need a PhD student. And then going a bit further afield, this is my all-time day-flying moth specialist site. One of the specialist species there is broad-bordered beehawk moth. Loves the bugloss flowers, viper's bugloss, I mean. In my opinion, it's the hardest moth to photo because I'm not a good photographer. I don't have fancy sophisticated cameras. I don't do anything with the speed, and therefore I just try and get something that resembles something in focus. And I think I probably got 1,000 photos of broad-bordered beehawk moths, and this is the best one that I could produce. And here we are, all nationally scarce species. Marbled clover, bleak stripe, tawny wave, all found during the day. Forester moths, beautiful. You can see them in Chorley Wood Common, but you can see lots of them at Cranwich Camp. Clouded buff, we've got the male on the left-hand side, which does fly during the day, and the female, which is mainly nocturnal, which I just happen to disturb on the right. And then you've got this little, this is minute, by the way, and there you can see its exit hole. This is a bugloss case bearer. There's a vacated case on the gatepost. We were there, and this bloke came up to us and said, "Oh, if you go and look at the post, you can see the exit holes of the bugloss case bearer." Only a nationally scarce species, but there it was, and for once, I don't know how I got that in focus. Who knows? Nationally scarce grass moth, and not far away, but in West Norfolk, if you're very lucky and going about May, end of May, early June, you can encounter a lace border, nationally scarce species. And I mentioned Jersey tigers. This is just to, several people will, if they used to follow me on that social media platform previously known as Twitter. I am now on Blue Sky. I do not use Twitter. You will see that I often mention, I record a few Jersey tigers. Now, just to show, this is the habitat next to the trap in the summer. It's pretty flower rich, so that might be the reason. And this is my very first Jersey tiger, trapped on the 14th of August, 2009. It was joint first for Hertfordshire. And there you go, there's a few Jersey tigers and a few more and a few more. And if you look carefully, there's one there, there's one there, there's one there, one there, and there's probably lots more. They never actually land on the physical ground, so I don't tread on them, which actually I should say the heath trap has a habit of doing that. The moths are quite often in the grass, and that is really difficult because you only find them too late. But for some reason, my garden is an absolute magnet for this moth. Whereas I would normally take all my moths into the front garden after I've recorded them and released them there, well away from the house. These just fly off. They fly off into all the vegetation around the trap, and they stay there for most of the day. So it means that I quite often have to turn the light off for 24 hours to let them disperse. Whereas I normally would be trapping every day of the year, even in the winter. It's on now. And this is just some statistics. As you can see, the first one was recorded in 2009. By 2018, it had jumped from 39 to 575. That was bad enough. 2021, we jumped up to over 1,000, but then dropped in 22, which I thought, oh, that's, thank goodness for that. And then here we go. In 2003, the total count included several nights when I didn't trap, was 2,338. I have never seen so many Jersey tigers in my life, and the maximum nightly count that year was 299, and I could not make it 300, but it could well have been 301 for all I know. And to just give you some final moth stats, macro moths for 2002 to 2004. Species recorded in my garden, 419. Nationally recorded, including my garden, 471. Species, UK species that I've seen abroad probably adds about 20. It's a bit debatable figure because what is a UK species and what is a very occasional migrant, you can't really say. Micro moths you can see well down, 288 in my garden, and then nationally 311, which isn't that many more because it's not something I come across so much when I'm out and about or when I'm at my brother's or elsewhere. And adding to that, the number of leaf miner species that I have found since I started looking for them in 2002 is 119, which is not the total number available, but it's getting pretty close to nearly every leaf mining species, certainly every one that could be found in Hertfordshire. And so I'm just going to end with my favourite moth, or perhaps one of my favourite moths. So thank you for listening. I hope you found my adventure interesting. I hope it's what you expected to hear. And anyway, if you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And anyway, thank you for listening.
Well, that was really interesting, Liz. Thanks very much for that. We've got a little bit of time left for if anybody would like to ask a question, either put it in the chat or you can take your if you can put your microphone on and maybe even your camera and ask a question if you'd like to.
Oh, no one. That's good. I can go downstairs. Just so I noticed Tim Blackburn is listening. He's going to be one of our speakers at our Members' Day in April. So welcome to Tim, who I see has got he's probably gone to sleep. His picture looks like he's asleep. But it'll be very nice to meet him then. Ah, he says thanks. No questions. Oh well. It will be available for anyone who wants to see it again. Or
We've got a question in the chat from Davin who's asking, do you know of any resources on how to make a Skinner trap?
well, this is the problem. When I had to replace them, I had to use my old traps as templates. It's really frustrating that I cannot find the original piece of paper that they had on the Anglian Lepidopterist Supplies website. I suppose I could ask John Clifton if he's still got a copy, and I'm sure he would send me it, and then I could send it on to you, Davin. But it's basically the original ones were plywood, and I used hardwood plywood. It might have been better if I'd used marine ply, as my brother, who likes working on boats, told me I should do. But the last one was just bog standard hardwood ply, and it lasted 2 years. But you can use, there's a Facebook group called UK Moth Traps, and there's lots of people have lots of ideas on how to make different traps with different light bulb combinations. And that's also worth tapping into to see if you can glean any information from other people. But I will sort out, I'll try and send you, I'll try and find that piece of paper.
Well, lots of people saying thank you. A very interesting talk, enjoyable and inspiring, Christine says, which is high praise indeed.
Thank you.
I'd noticed you'd put Richard Lewington's book up there, which I think is a fantastic resource. And I noticed yesterday he's published his book on spiders,
Yes, I saw
which has
that.
just come out, which he had told me is going to be his last book. Whether he sticks to that or not, I don't know. But I think that's again another groundbreaking resource, and one that I think will be really interesting for people that are keen on that subject. Hillary's asking, do you
Do
know
I
the
know the
moth
moth?
sailing boat?
There is a class, a dinghy called the Moth, a moth. I don't know if that's the one she means. It's a single-handed one. I've never got in a single-handed boat because I know it capsize. But no, I was amazed when I went to look at the Reader's Digest book, which was from the 80s, that it included a lot of his drawings. They weren't all his, but I don't think you can beat his drawings.
Mm. I have the birds and the quite a set of them.
Well, the Reader's Digest.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, we do. And my husband still gets it. When he sees a funny old bird in the garden, he still refers to
yeah,
that.
I do. Yeah. Because
But
it shows not just the one picture, quite a few pictures of different
yeah,
aspects, different sexes.
yeah. And I think because they were such attractive pictures, they
Mm,
really made you look at them and think what beautiful creatures.
mhm.
Mm. Okay, well, if we haven't got any more, then just my job to say thank you ever so much to Liz. It was really interesting and much appreciated. And reminder that the next talk is on a year in Provence with Roger Gibbons, which is on Wednesday, the 5th of March. So look forward to seeing some of you then, and thanks for joining.
And thank you for listening. Thank you. I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
Liz.